Hey there, this is Introduction to Graphic Design, Episode 5. We're talking about hierarchy, modularity, and structure. And I'm Alvalyn Lundgren. Much of what you do in your design decisions is basically an effort to impose order on information and narrative. So hierarchy is the order of importance within a group. Hierarchy exists in all aspects of culture. It exists in how we organize our lives, organize our stuff. It's something we're very used to. As graphic designers, it's our responsibility to create order and sort information in a meaningful way. And that way, people can use that information, make decisions about it, and otherwise respond to it. And hierarchy is essentially the order of importance of things. So what you're doing is ranking things in terms of their significance or even their meaning. All cultures use hierarchy. All social systems use hierarchy. You'll find hierarchy used in title design, publications, in billboards, in statistics, in outlines for books and term papers, in menus. It's everywhere. As designers, we express hierarchy visually by varying scale, by using color, by using value and spacing and placement and so forth. And it's a central task undertaken by the graphic designer. Good design is ordered. Good design is orderly, it's not chaotic. If you don't engage in hierarchy, if you don't impose that kind of first read, second read, third read order, graphic communication is impossible. We have so much clutter visually in our lives that order is necessary. Order causes things to stand out. Order causes things to get noticed. When you use hierarchy, you can use it in a very simple way or a very complex way. But no matter how you use it, what you're doing is creating various levels, and there is a movement from one level to another, from a top level to a lower level. And we do this through the use of scale, which is size, and value, which is light and dark, placement within the design, color, changing out color to emphasize certain things and de-emphasize others, the use of focal point and emphasis within a design, and also how things are spaced, which is different from placement. So if we talk about levels and we want to look for what's the first thing we need to see, this design doesn't have a lot of different levels. The whole thing reads almost as a top level. Essentially, the first thing we see is the TDC. Notice that's a little bit confusing because of this little hook. It almost makes the T into a J. The linear elements, the wide black lines outlining the dominant letters in this sort of maze, you see that first. And then all the typography is on the same level. So you're going to see the whole thing first, and then you're going to see the type. Now, within the typography, notice something. It's very difficult to read it. It's very difficult to sort the information visually. The use of typography to convey the information, the use of the design, what the design is doing, is actually more art-oriented. It's not really functioning as a piece of graphic design to communicate clearly. The reader is either going to approach this and say, hey, it's too complicated and move away from it quickly, or they're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what it says because there is no hierarchy being used. The type is facing to the right, it's facing to the left, it's cascading vertically, so it's just all over the place, but it's a mashup of letter forms that it's going to take the viewer a very long time to figure out the meaning of it. And then once you figure out the meaning, of course, you have to respond to it in some way. You have to make a decision about it. So this does not portray hierarchy. And I wanted to show you this because you can recognize the difficulty of not using hierarchy. Don't trade hierarchy and good design for cleverness. Be clever, but also design well. This is a little better. Obviously, we come in on the A and the G, and then the secondary information is at the next level, and then the tertiary information is on the third level. So this uses hierarchy very well. This also uses hierarchy. We land on the palette with the knife and fork, and we get that visual pun. Then we go up here to modern art in your life. So this is the first read, and we understand that there's something about art or feeding on art or making a daily consumption of art. Then we go up here to the title of the book, and then this is tertiary. This is the third read. One of the ways we create hierarchy is through color. This is a business card, and it's front and back views, and we've got Delo's kitchen. And if you squint your eye, kitchen becomes secondary to the white against the black. The name of the restaurant stands out. Then here we are separating this text from this text. This being on the black, we're going to see this before we see this. So we use color to create hierarchy. In this case, the white is the first level read, and then the second level is kitchen. This becomes the first level because it's on the black, and this is the second level on the yellow-orange. We create hierarchy by using emphasis. An emphasis is a design principle, it's a relational design principle, in which we separate or point to certain information so that it stands out. So looking at this business card, what stands out here is the name. It's separated from the rest of the copy. So this becomes emphasized. Same thing here, even though we have additional information here, there is still a separation, there's still white space there, so this becomes emphasized. And this tends to merge with the rest of the copy. Changing shape is something we can use to create emphasis. So here on this business card we can see typography, but then the hand lettering stands out from the typography. The Gutenberg principle is a universal design principle that explains how people will enter a design space from the upper left and move to the lower right in an alphabet-based left-to-right written language. We enter here and we move here. Another universal design principle talks about the first thing we read and the last thing we read. And everything in the middle is secondary. So given that there is no visual hierarchy going on in a list or this kind of text where things are kind of listed, this is our hierarchy. The first thing we come to is the most important. The next issue, the next level is this. So by virtue of position, where things are located within a design, we create levels of hierarchy. Things that are larger are going to be more important than things that are smaller. So here we have teddy bear holding. So we want to know that it's teddy bear, and holding is secondary to that. And then the address. The person's name is larger. It's also bolder. So that is a shape change. And then you are using uppercase and then uppercase and lowercase. And of course the teddy bear face is dominant on the card. So we use scale to create levels of importance in a design. So as information and technology increase and communication systems become more and more complex and complicated, your ability as a designer to sort and order information, to make sense of things, to distill things into simple hierarchical constructs so that people can easily grasp and take hold of information is going to make you increasingly valuable. That's a skill that all designers should have, and it's providing great service to other people to be able to do that. So modularity relates to hierarchy, but we use modularity to design space and to set up systems and structures within individual designs so that information is ordered and there is unity among the elements in the design. So what's modularity? Well, it's a unit. It's a defined unit, fixed or standardized element that you use to build a more complex structure. Lego bricks are modules. A pixel on your computer display is a module. A single square on a piece of grid paper is a module. And you combine those modules in various ways to create larger things. So we can look at it like this. Modules are building blocks. And you can take a module, a unit form, like a square, and by how you combine that square, you create within the same space a variety of different visual results. Each one of these is based on the square. Generally speaking, we're going to think of modules as squares, We're very used to that shape as a module. Every module has boundaries. There is a height and width. There is a proportion, and you can scale up or scale down, but the proportion will remain the same. You can extend to change the proportion, but the multiplied module still remains in proportion to the original size. And so you have constraints, you have boundaries within your design. When we deal with modules, it makes the actual design problem solving easier because we're not really worried about where things are going on a page. We just build the page structure module by module, and then we just kind of plug and play. You can think of this in terms of templates. Templates for websites and graphic design environments like brochures and resumes and business cards. They're all over the place. You can buy a template and just plug in your information. Well, that template is built on modules. Working within constraints is part of the challenge, but also the fun of design. And you can think of a module as a ready-made thing that you can use to help control the design. Modules are smaller sections of a larger whole, and you can see in this grid that you can use modules very creatively. The basic module is a square. In fact, the whole thing is a square. We can see in this design layers upon layers of squares, giving quite a number of options for being creative by placing things within this design based on those modules. So you have a lot of decisions to make when you are designing something. So working with modules reduces the number of decisions that you have to make because modules are predetermined. That's part of the idea of their having constraints. They're already set. When you use modules, you can focus more on the larger problems of the design and let go of the smaller structural ones. So you set up a structure, you generate modules based on that structure, and then you basically drag or fill those modules in. And by drag I mean just place. You've got a particular location, a placement, and size of a module, and you just fill that with content. Here's one very common example of modules that we use every day. It's a calendar. It's a grid calendar. So we're very familiar with the idea of modules. We put a line, a box around every day of the week. We put a box around a set of days, which makes a month. We put boxes around years. So we go from smaller modules to greater modules. If we look at this identity system consisting of a business card, envelope, and letterhead, we can visually understand the use of modules. We also have hierarchy working here, by the way. So looking at the letterhead, this is the first read. And it is contained within a rectangular module or box. There's some space. That's a module. There is another rectangular box containing type. There's some space. That's another module. There's another rectangular module containing type. And all of these are aligned on a common baseline. They all have a kind of common distance from here to here and from here to here. On the business card, there's the hierarchy going on as well. So this is the first read, here's the second read, here's the third read. This is a module. This is a module. This is a module. When you repeat modules, you create a series, and so you have seriality. In pattern design, you're repeating shapes, you're repeating colors. You create a series of things that move across the surface. So anytime you directly repeat modules or you repeat modules with some sort of change-up, you're creating a series. Versioning is another concept that relates to modularity. Versioning is simply variations in the module. So when you repeat the module, you still have the series, so you've got seriality going, but then there are variations that change things up and make things more interesting. This is a logo design that uses modularity, but it also uses versioning. Here we have the original logo. The M is made out of modules. This can be split apart in various ways and used for various things, but it all visually relates. This can be animated, and it was. Each version can be used for different things. There's a color change up. Values remain kind of the same throughout. Overall, we can see how each version is not so far afield that it stops relating visually to the first thing in the series. Mohawk's logo makes use of versioning. By the way, with corporate identity design and brand design, brand identities, versioning is not only on trend, it's been on trend for a long time, but when you design a logo, you design a variety of versions or options that can be used in various ways for various things. So Mohawk is a connect the dots logo, and we can see different options for it, but they are all related. So hierarchy and modularity all relate to grid system design. Now, you don't have to design using a grid system, but if you want to ensure that your designs make sense visually, that they unify, that they're organized, and in more complex or multi-page designs that there is a continuity, you're going to want to use grid systems. Grid systems are kind of the hallmark of Swiss design in mid-century modern and the New York school. They still remain very much in common use, and visual designers of all persuasions are encouraged to use grid systems simply because it helps organize space and makes things actually easier to design. Basically, it's the idea of you build a structure and then you compose your design on top of that structure. So the structure tells you where things in the design can go. Having a structure also helps white space, negative space, fully participate in the design. So you don't forget about the white space when you're dealing with grids. Grids are basically a network of lines that subdivide space. And you use that grid as a guide to organize elements in your composition. And the grid also helps to unify the design because the grid's going to relate to the structural shape of your design. So you're going to start with the rectangle or the square, and you're going to subdivide that based on the overall shape of the rectangle or square. And on that grid, you're going to lay in your elements, so everything is going to work together. So as you can see in this example, there is a network of linear elements. There are column blocks, and there are margins. The use of the margins and the gutters between the columns not only helps to organize the space, but it adds white space and acknowledges and uses white space in its role of supporting the visible elements. So the ability to read the text is enhanced because of the white space around each text box. Notice there's a sense of hierarchy, larger type. There's some bolder type, so that's a color and shape change. Smaller type here. And there are modules. Here's a module, another module, another module. And if you subdivide this space into its smallest unit form, you'll see that everything is based on a square. So this is 2 squares tall, this is 2 squares up, 2 squares below, and so forth. Grids allow you to vary scale. So grids work with hierarchy in organizing the space. So here's the overall square grid with the gutter lines dividing the rectangular space. And here we're starting to lay in the copy on the grid, and we are conforming to the grid, so each block of text is a module within the grid. This is a module, this is a module, this takes up 3 spatial cells, this takes up 2 spatial cells, this takes up 2 units wide. The active content of this, for the most part, is above the halfway point vertically. And here we see that the white space is not white, but it's red. The type is white. When you have a lot of information to convey and a lot of stuff going on, if you don't use a grid, you're going to have a mess. This website is almost yelling at you with various pieces of information, with various calls to action, but it's organized on a grid. And the grid serves to quiet things down and to highlight various pieces of information so that the user of the site knows what to do. So here's the navigation. There's secondary navigation here. We have some body copy. This is a call to action block. So lots of information, lots of different things going on. This is kind of the design style of this particular brand. Everything's organized on a grid, so it becomes usable and information becomes sortable because of that. In this book layout, we have a module. We have modules in the margin. There's a margin width on either side. And then the pages, the headers, and everything are sorted and ordered according to the grid. This website uses an active grid. We can actually see the grid lines in the white. So we have a module, other modules, another module, another module. This is a very well-known grid, allowing for a variety of uses. This is a structural grid on which you get to place your content. So in conclusion, the grid is a means of generating form, arranging images, arranging typography, organizing information. It can work in the background. It can be an active, visible element in the design. We become aware of grids as active elements align on it. Some grids are more formal and precise, and others are more free-form and fluid. And because in using the grid, you're breaking the overall space down into smaller parts, you're able to leave open areas and make the open areas work with the active content rather than filling up the entire page with stuff.